If we could take our seats, please. Well, on behalf of National Review, I'd like to welcome you to this discussion of the very important issue that we're here to talk about today. I'd like to also welcome our online viewers who are joining us. We've got a great lineup, and I'm going to launch into it. Oh, I suppose I should tell you who I am. Ramesh Ponnuru. I'm a senior editor at National Review, and I look forward to learning a lot more about these water issues today. I've been reading about them in National Review, but I'm sure we're going to go into it in some depth. We're going to hear first from Congressman David Valadao, who represents the 21st Congressional District of California, was elected in 2010. Good year, as I recall. And his family immigrated to the U.S. from Portugal and runs 2 dairy farms in California. He serves on the House Committee on Appropriations, and along with the whip, Kevin McCarthy, and Congressman Devin Nunes, he recently introduced H.R. 3964, the Sacramento-San Joaquin Valley Emergency Water Delivery Act, to restore water reliability to California communities. And I'm sure he's going to talk about that today. So without further ado, please welcome Congressman Valadao.
Well, good afternoon. I'm here to talk about probably one of the most important issues facing California today, and it's obviously our water crisis that we face. Water is one of the most interesting topics because it's so confusing. Something as simple as water that we see in water bottles everywhere, and we think that should be simple, should be something we all agree on, but for some reason it's gotten to be one of the most contentious issues we're facing in California. A little bit of a background. 2/3 of the water comes from Northern California. 2/3 of the population is Southern California. And the water infrastructure we have now in place is pretty amazing. And they started building it probably around the 30s, and they ended with the last reservoir built and finished in 1979, the new Malones Dam. Currently, there are 2 major projects there. The Central Valley Project, which has 20 dams and reservoirs, 11 power plants, and 500 miles of canals, conduits, and tunnels. And then you also have the State Water Project, which is 34 storage facilities, reservoirs, and lakes, 20 pumping plants, 4 pumping generating plants, and 5 hydroelectric plants, and 701 miles of pipeline or canals and stuff. But the most important thing here is when you think about how important water is or how far we move it, for those of you here on the East Coast, we basically move water from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta, Georgia. It's about the equivalent of the distance we move water in California. So it's a major deal for us. And the problem that we have is this infrastructure was an investment that taxpayers made, and it came over time, and it was something that obviously we know is important and had to be built, or else they wouldn't have done it in the first place. And since it was built, we've now seen attempts, and very successful attempts, to start to redirect water away from its original purposes. And so we're starting to see a lot of water go away from the farmers, from the communities, and a lot of these communities built around this water infrastructure. You see a lot of it along the west side of the valley, Mendota, Avenal, Kalinga, and now even with Kettleman. And I don't know if a lot of you follow what happened in Kettleman, but Kettleman has a real issue with water that isn't safe to drink. And so we rely on Delta water coming through the canal to be treated and then served to those people. And you see it along the east side of the valley as well, the San Joaquin Valley there. And that water comes from the Friant-Kern Canal System, which is the Friant Reservoir. But what we've seen is water has basically been sent out into the ocean. And what happened in the mid-'90s or early 90s was a deal called the Bay Delta Accord. That deal allowed up to 800,000 acre-feet of water to be sent to the environment to protect the environment and for environmental purposes. And it was an agreement that was made. It was signed by the Clinton administration. It was brought in, obviously, with the support of our state government and local environmentalists and agriculture groups. And at that time, farmers actually weren't happy with it. They thought we're giving up way too much. But since then, since a lot of the lawsuits and the biological opinions have come along, we've actually gotten to the point where we lose 50% more than what we had agreed to. So we're up over 1 million acre-feet on average going out to the environment. And so It's sad. I mean, when you live there and you understand the situation for yourself, I'm, like you said earlier, I'm a farmer. My parents are new to this country. My dad came in '69, but we farm, and when you have your communities and create jobs, and you have your employees, and you have to drill wells and go through this process of installing infrastructure so that you can grow crops. I mean, a lot of people don't seem to make that connection between crops and jobs, or crops and feeding people, or crops and what's on your plate here in Washington, D.C. And we grow such a large majority of the food, and the costs that are involved when it comes to growing this and these crops, and then obviously the amount of jobs and what it does for these communities is a huge deal. And this past year, myself on my own personal farm, we had to drill 2 wells. And my neighbors across the street drilled another well. And then the other neighbors down the street are drilling more wells. And that's obviously put a huge a burden on our underground water storage. And so that's why this infrastructure was built, so we wouldn't have to get to this point. This infrastructure was designed so that we would have water from the areas that had plenty of water. And we had these agreements also in the last few years that helped allow some water to protect the environment for these endangered species and others are trying to protect, but also have some to protect our communities, protect our jobs, and protect clean water for our families. And now what we're seeing is there's not enough getting out there about what's actually causing some of the problems in the Delta. I mean, a lot of people don't talk about the fact that they're dumping 380 million gallons of sewage into the Delta every day. A lot of people aren't talking about the striped bass that is eating the Delta smelt and the salmon smolt, the baby salmon. And so you've got this invasive species there that isn't natural to the Delta, and it's actually eating something that they're trying to protect. Why aren't we helping that? And then you've also got the boats that are coming in, the ships that are bringing imports and exports out. They fill their ballast tanks with water from wherever they're filling up their boats or unloading their ships. So you've got this water bringing in other species from these other parts of the country, and those species have had an impact on our water there as well. And then you've obviously got pumping. No one will deny that pumping doesn't have an impact on the Delta. What we're saying is it's not to the level, and it's not the solution. It's not what's going to save the Delta. Let's be honest about the situation. We're willing to work with you guys. We're willing to settle this the way it needs to be settled, but let's use some real science and talk about the whole picture and not just the part where they obviously don't like us in the valley or they don't like farming. But it is something that we've tried to focus on. And this year, I've spent the first year working in Congress, and this is my first term, so I'm still pretty new here. But we introduced a bill earlier this year, 3964, which is a lot like 1837 that was passed by Congressman Nunes and a large part of the delegation in California before. But the bill actually did help quite a bit. It addressed the situation with the pumping. We go back to the Bay Delta Accord, which is an agreement that was made. It's not an extreme ask. It's not a pump the Delta dry, but it's let's be reasonable here. Let's go back to this agreement that just a few decades ago was reasonable, was one that we could agree on. And so we want to make sure we have access to that water. And everybody agrees that finding some way to bring water from the Delta to the valley is a solution. Even Senator Feinstein and Senator Boxer have introduced legislation that aims at helping resolve that. And so it's not a partisan issue. It's not an issue that people don't understand, and it's not a made-up story. It's something that we all agree has to be fixed, but how to fix it is where the disagreement comes in. Our approach was obviously going back to this agreement that I think makes sense, the Bay Delta Accord, and that's why it's in 3964. We also take into account that San Joaquin River settlement. That was a settlement that was made after 18 years of lawsuits with the Friant Dam. They released water down the San Joaquin River, and that river is not prepared for that water yet. The river's being sent down this the water is being sent down this river to bring back this salmon species. But a lot of communities have built up, homes have gotten closer to this old river, and now this new water that is being forced down this river is actually hurting some of those constituents in that area, and it's not helping the salmon come back just yet. And so we're saying, please back off of that. Let's go back to sending that water down to the southeast side of the valley, where communities like Orange Cove, Lindsay, and Fresno need that water for their homes, and obviously farmers. We've got communities like Terabella who have lots of citrus, and I know people don't think that much about citrus until you go to the grocery store and you start to see some of the brands that come out of our district, like Sunkist, like Halo, like Cuties, and all these things that your kids love and you probably enjoy eating on your salads and other things. Those things are growing in this area, and those regions have huge amounts of money invested in these trees and growing, and now we just cut off the water with absolutely no way around it. There's no groundwater to pump. There's nothing they can do. I was talking to a friend of mine there in Terabella the other day, which I represent part of that area as well. And he has no options unless we figure out a way to bring some of that water back. And that's one of the issues that we face and that my bill helps with is San Joaquin River settlement, try to bring that water back to the south, to the canal. Another issue is infrastructure. Our infrastructure was designed for 22 million people, and we haven't spent enough money on it. And so we authorized the construction of some reservoirs and some more dams and some more storage for the state. And that's obvious, that has to be part of the solution. It's not just about pumping, but it's also using the water we get wisely. So I think that's important. We try to address that, or we do address that in the bill. Where is the bill now, or what happens now? The bill was passed off the House floor, 229 votes. It was we did have bipartisan support. Congressman Jim Costa was one of the gentlemen that voted for it, and now it sits in the Senate. As soon as the bill passed, Senator Feinstein and Boxer and a couple senators from Oregon introduced a bill in the Senate, and so within a couple days I was sitting in her office talking about her bill and where we can work together. At the end of the day, a bill passed out of the House or a bill introduced is just worth a press release, and press releases don't solve our problems. We have to get to a conclusion. We have to come to a solution here. And so meeting with the senator was really important. It's something that my staff and myself continue to work with her office to try to find a way to work this out. Her bill takes a little bit different perspective than mine. She uses existing law and existing flexibility in some of the pumping restrictions, and she wants to maximize that. And happy to help her with that, but we need to be able to deliver a bill off the Senate floor and get the votes so that we can have this conversation so we can actually get something to the President's desk. And the President took the time to come out and visit us in the Valley. I wasn't personally invited, but at the end of the day, it was still good that he came because he is the President of the United States. His signature is important to making sure that whatever we do bring to fix this problem, his signature is the only way it'll ever be implemented. So it is something that I take very seriously. It's something that I would love to work with him on this issue. It is something that's important to us, and it's something that is not partisan. But when he did come in, what did it do? Just like when Speaker Boehner came out a few weeks early for me in Bakersfield, brought a lot of attention to this issue. And now the President flying in and spending a few hours there was great. I mean, it literally brought in a lot of attention that needed to be there. And the more people spend on this issue and understand this issue, the better off we are. The more they see where there are some policies in place that are hurting people, and these are really hurting people at home. When you've got communities that are about to run out of water, where the federal agencies will use lines like, well, they're getting 70% of their historical use. Well, historical use, because we've been getting less and less water every year, that historical use number, and even a 70 sounds great, but it really equates to about 40%. And so when you've got city councils and city managers coming to me and saying, hey, we don't know what we're going to do. The people at home, and imagine that at your own homes, when you turn on that faucet and no water comes out, and that's what we're looking at facing today. I know there's a lot of press about 17 different communities around the state, but there's a lot of communities that weren't named that are in my district that are facing the same type of issues. And I know a lot of people like to throw it out there that this is all about a drought. But like I mentioned earlier, all those reservoirs, all that plumbing that was built and designed over those years is no different than a bank account. And for those of you who have bank accounts, when you have a job, it's difficult to put money away, but you save money. You put it away so that if you do lose a job, you have that opportunity to use that money to pay your bills and to feed yourself. Well, that infrastructure is our bank account. We put water in that bank account when we have water, when there's water flowing, and we pump it out, we put it in storage so that when we're in a situation like we are today, we have somewhere to draw from so that we're not suffering like we are today. Our argument, my bill, and what we've been pushing is making sure that we've got that infrastructure in place, use it to the best we can, make sure that we put water in there so that we do not suffer like we are today. And then when that water runs out, I mean, we can't fix the situation. We can't make it rain. We all know that. That's just one of the more idiotic comments that I get all the time. You know you can't make it rain. Well, yeah, but I know that we can put stuff away and we can save it for these types of periods. And that, again, falls into the infrastructure part of my bill. The reason why we introduce infrastructure is because we need more room to store more water because population is much larger than it was when this was originally designed, and we know it's going to keep growing, and we have to be prepared for that. And so that's why passing this legislation and getting something to the President's desk is so important. I mean, I understand the politics of it. I understand the importance of press releases and getting your name out there. But at the end of the day, if we don't solve problems, there's really no purpose of coming back to Washington. And so this is something I take very seriously, something I want to continue to work on, and something that I want to make sure it stays in the forefront until we fix this problem. So I appreciate the opportunity to come. I don't know if I used up enough time, but I'm not one, like was mentioned when I first ran for office, a man of few words. And I think that's a good thing. But it's important, and I appreciate the opportunity to come talk about this important issue. And I apologize that I do have to leave. It's a little bit of a trip to get back to California to see my kids. So thank you again for the opportunity, and anything we could ever do, my door is always open.
Few words, but wisely chosen.